In a time of rising unrest, when borders dominate headlines and immigration policy shapes the future of our nation, the truth matters. From the front lines of law enforcement, national security, and public policy, this is Frontline Facts, where rhetoric is stripped away, where politics takes a back seat, and where facts, hard, documented facts, lead the conversation. As instability grows beyond our southern border, as communities feel the impact at home, we bring you informed voices. Attorneys, senior law enforcement leaders, policy experts, and professionals who understand the law, the protocols, and the consequences. This isn't opinion. This isn't spin. This is clarity in a time of confusion. This is Frontline Facts, and the conversation starts now.
Welcome to Frontline Facts, where we cut through the rhetoric and confront the realities shaping our communities, our state, and our nation. Immigration is the most debated, misunderstood, and politically charged issue in America today. Headlines move fast. Opinions move faster, but the facts require expertise. Today, we go directly to the source. Joining us is immigration attorney Magali Candler, a respected legal voice with deep experience navigating the complexities of U.S. immigration law. She works on the front lines of policy and people, helping families, advising clients, and interpreting the statutes that so many talk about, but really very few truly understand. In this episode, we separate law from negative narrative, process from politics, and emotions from enforcement. What does the law actually say? How does it really work? And what does it mean for communities here in Texas and across the country? This is Frontline Facts. Let's begin. Magali, welcome to the show this morning. I want to just absolutely thank you for becoming available this very important day. I know that the rhetoric and the fear exists in the community. So let's go over a little bit about your background. You and I have known each other at the very least almost 25 to 30 years. And you are not only a incredible immigration attorney, but you're also certified through the federal courts, as many have to be required to do if you're going to be helping some of the people that you help, because you're a special sort of training and acceptance to be able to represent clients in court. So let's go over a little bit of your background. How did you get started? I know that you've been with some of the nonprofit organizations that have benefited a lot, that a lot of clients have benefited from, but tell me a little bit about how you got started and where you went from there.
Yes, thank you so much, Luisa. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here and happy to be able to help and answer all the questions that are out there. I started my career at Catholic Charities. I promised my husband here in Houston, Texas, promised my husband 2 years there. And I just really felt called to do it. I knew that I would be helping immigrants. I was good in court, had good court skills, and a lot of people needed help. I was bilingual, and I felt it was something I could do for a short time. I ended up staying there 10 and a half years, and you and I met when I was at Catholic Charities, and I ended up leading the program, being the head of the program of, at the time it was called the Texas Center for Immigrant Legal Assistance. And now it's called, and for short, the acronym looked like Tequila, TCILA. And now it's called the Cabrini Center for Immigrant Assistance, I believe. But the program is still there at Catholic Charities. I helped grow it from a little one that was primarily had been doing the amnesty cases, what people called amnesty in the 80s. And we really made it a full service for things having to do only with asylum, refugee, and family-based cases at the nonprofit. Any employment-based cases at the time, of course, we referred those out. And I did do religious workers. I did work with some nuns and some Protestant ministers. But anyway, that's where I got my start. I really wanted to work in the community. And I changed from doing it for 2 years. I really couldn't just do it a short time. I was really, I felt compelled to be there and stay there. It was a luxury to help people who could not afford my services. I think that's what really led me to be there longer. If I were not an only child and my parents needed me and my dad had cancer and being an only child, they were going to move to Houston and we really wanted to help them. My husband is very generous and we knew we'd be helping them, especially with me as an only child. So I went into private practice. And again, you and I still worked while together and we would do community things. I still kept volunteering and being a board member of different nonprofits.
I remember that.
Yes, like the Tahrir Justice Center. And I've always helped advise at the time back then, the YMCA International Services. And oh my, so many of them. So many that I can't even name them all. I'm sitting here thinking, but I've always been very supportive. Oh, and the law clinic, the immigration law clinic at U of H. JaVale, who you remember, I knew. He started that after he left being an immigration judge. And I was always on the advisory council for them as well, and I still am. But I went into private practice. I really needed to make more money. But I've still continued working with the community. Even now, I opened my own firm. I became a partner at Tyndall and Foster. We merged with Gordon Kwan. We became Foster Kwan. I was a partner there. And I ended up being there 14 and a half, almost 15 years. And then I opened my own firm in 2014. I've been doing this now, almost 37 years.
That's amazing.
And I left on very friendly terms with my former firm, and it is now called Foster. But anyway, that's my background. I'm board certified in immigration law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization.
And Magali, explain why it's so important in today's day and age that attorneys are certified, because not anybody can do it. Not anyone can represent someone in court.
Right. Well, I will say technically that a licensed attorney who is licensed in the United States could technically represent someone at the immigration court. However, and also they would need to get licensed in the federal courts to do the habeas work, the mandamus work, the naturalization work, when you can go to federal court and hold the government to its 120 days for the decision after naturalization. So for that, you do need to be licensed at the different federal district courts. But being board certified, even though not technically totally required, you really just need to be a licensed attorney. I do have to say a shout out, first of all, to help to encourage all my colleagues to get board certified, because it forces you to become certified in knowing every area of immigration law. You have to be competent in employment-based, in court, in inadmissibility, deportability. So I really do give a shout out for that. And I know that I have a lot of clients, some companies, some individuals who are looking to make sure that their attorney is board certified in immigration law.
And you and I have worked many years together. I mean, I remember being with INS and just doing a lot of work with town hall meetings and making sure that people in the communities were informed. One of the things I know you realize, and you and I are going to talk about this, is the fact that there is so much fraud when there is mass migration and there are people that prey on the vulnerable.
Yes.
And I really despise it when that happens, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. Although some may break the law, it is still a crime to enter this country illegally. It's a Title 8, Section 1325 violation, yet it's a misdemeanor. But I have seen people for tens of thousands of dollars when they're not eligible. Your attorneys that run their businesses unscrupulously, and they prey on the vulnerable and they take their money and then they run. I mean, you get the backlash on that when you get people that say, I've paid somebody $16,000 and I can't even find their office any longer.
Right.
Talk a little bit about what the fraud looks like when we have changes like we see today.
I've seen so many victims of that. It started at Catholic Charities. So I saw it from the beginning. And sadly, Luisa, what you say is true for every single year that I've done this work. It started out, many of my clients back then who were in removal, back then deportation proceedings, later called removal, they ended up being basically turned in for deportation or removal by notaries or unscrupulous lawyers who were taking their money. And, I used to think, well, maybe some of those notaries were really trying to help the community and just didn't know better. But, I really believe now, knowing what I know, that it's always been people, as you said, unscrupulous, trying to make money. Many of them over the years, I would ask, how much did they charge you to do this? You didn't even qualify for this. And the numbers were higher than a private attorney would charge sometimes, or equal to. And these are people filing things that basically, when it gets to immigration, it's either going to be denied and then the person put in removal because now it's kind of like turning themselves in. Hi, I overstayed a visa. I have no papers. Or hi, I entered at the border. I wanted to make a better life. I got desperate. I came in and now I'm in removal, deportation. Nobody had caught me before. So many of them ended up like that. Some of them, they lose their life savings. And again, many of them then end up being, or even themselves charged with fraud. Now, I want you to know that I have found immigration over the years to be very fair when they saw that somebody was a victim, because I have represented people over the years that were eligible for something. By the time they came to me, they were eligible, but then something in their past, something had been submitted by a very unscrupulous person, and immigration would recognize it, that they had been a victim. Sometimes it was very obvious where they were telling the truth. I had one lady taken in for an interview on an amnesty case, we used to call amnesty legalization, which ended many years ago. And you had to have entered before January of 82. So she went to her interview, and her parents, who did have a proper amnesty, she had come later, and they had taken her to a notary, and they apparently had submitted false documents. She was very innocent of everything, and her parents, they did wrong. And now, by the time I was helping her, they had passed away. But when she went to an interview, they really understood. They asked her questions. Everything she said was the truth. And they looked at her and they said, well, you're not eligible. And she said, well, I just did, the notary filled this out for me. My parents took me to the notary. She was relatively young at the time, and they did not put her in removal. And by the time she came to me, thank goodness, Luisa, she was eligible for relief, and we had to address the old application that had been filed for which she didn't qualify. We had a really long sworn statement and explaining how at the interview she had been nothing but honest. And yeah, they approved her. Nobody accused her of fraud, as they didn't accuse her of fraud before. Having said that,
and those cases are important because people think that it's the big bad wolf in the corner that doesn't ever want to approve any kind of an application or done that they're absolutely heartless. And you and I know a lot of people that have worked for Legacy INS as well as the new UCIS. The one thing I can say is, you've had a remarkable career in the fact that you really have become a subject matter expert as a lawyer. I know the over 200 statutes, and I had to learn them by heart and know when to apply them when I was out there with all meetings and giving out interviews as the spokesperson for INS and for ICE. But one of the things that I think creates all the confusion is the lies that are being spewed. Not all media outlets are being honest about what the rhetoric should say. And people, whether they get mad or not, we're never going to make everybody happy at immigration. It's something that you either like it or you don't. And that's just what I have learned. But I've been doing this a long time and consulting people and guiding them to the correct attorneys, you being one of them. But one of the things that really absolutely boils my blood is to see the lies and just spewing the lies and the way that people are being treated. And you know me, I want to get to the truth and correct the rhetoric. In many cases, it's, the media fear mongers and really does a lot to implement the fear amongst the communities that is unnecessary. And I just say, let's go back to what the statute says. And let's talk a little bit about the asylum laws, for example. you and I both know that they have strict requirements. And in the
Yes.
previous administration, those requirements weren't being met because most often than not, you know that if you come in as an asylee, you have to do it and report yourself into an open port of entry, bar none.
Yeah.
And the second thing is usually you're held in custody until that case is remitted. I know that things have changed over the years, but let's talk about the specifics and the requirements and why so many people have been lied to and are being denied today.
Yes. It's an interesting law and it's very difficult. So the first thing I think for everyone to know, and I know you know this, is that it's extremely difficult to win asylum. But I'll say very quickly that asylum, what it is that you are forced to prove under the statute, the laws, the immigration laws, that you meet the definition of refugee. And that's a very strict requirement. And there were lots of people escaping, bad situations, sometimes maybe to the level where they could be granted asylum, maybe not. But it's interesting because many people, and I noticed this, in fact, during the last administration, and then at the end, they weren't allowing anybody in. And now it's more difficult even so. But many people were. I'm consulting with somebody now, in fact, who did present himself to CBP, Customs and Border Protection, saying he wanted to apply for asylum. He had made his way all the way from Colombia on foot, pretty crazy, but he had, and made it all the way to the border of Mexico. But anyway, that started like that. He was detained. He was paroled out, and his asylum case is on appeal. And there's something else I'm consulting with him about, but it did remind me that he did try to do everything when he did make it to the border properly, as far as presenting himself. But I do want to point out that even if you enter illegally in the past, now the Biden administration did put something out where you wouldn't be allowed to apply for asylum if you entered illegally after a certain date and did not turn yourself in to CBP. So at least even then, they were trying to clamp down on it. But I do want to point out, just because it's happened over the years, many of my asylum cases at Catholic Charities were people that did not necessarily turn themselves in. Many of them were caught at the border, said they wanted to apply for asylum, but they weren't necessarily looking for CBP or what used to be Border Patrol. They were just not put in removal or at the time, deportation. And again, contrary to popular belief, and you and I see it on both sides, everybody that I represented at Catholic Charities who had come in like that all wanted to go to court, do the right thing. They were all in removal. I mean, I keep saying what it's called now. Back then it was deportation. And they really did want to do it right. And they did go to court and they did apply. But you want to prove, so it's hard to win asylum. You must prove that you meet the definition of refugee, that you have a well-founded fear of persecution from the government or a group that the government cannot or will not control on account of their race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group that's persecuted, or their political opinion.
It certainly doesn't matter that one of the qualifications isn't, a hurricane or a bad economic situation. There has to be a credible fear.
Yes, a reasonable fear.
A reasonable
of one
fear
of those,
of something.
Yeah, being
Now,
persecuted, not of the hurricane, not of general war conditions.
well, and the other thing is also, I look at, for example, a lot of the people that were trying to apply for asylum that were like the Tren de Aragua. There's certainly a requirement that prohibits you from doing that based on the fact that a lot of these people were criminal aliens coming into the country with already heinous crimes. And what do you do?
Now
those are the ones that you have to remove.
Yeah, they're all vetted and they would be caught or should be caught, especially if there's anything having to do with Interpol or their own country, because not only is it difficult to prove what I said for winning asylum, you can have that well-founded fear of the future persecution or having past persecution where you left persecution on account of one of those things. but you cannot prove you're a refugee. You cannot get refugee status in a third country. You cannot win asylum here, as you said, if you're a persecutor yourself or have a serious crime. And everybody does go through some very long security things. I myself know of people, I do want to mention, Luisa, so people know, you can apply for asylum without being in removal or deportation. Let's say you entered as a visitor and something happens in your country, to your family, to somebody, where now you've got a well-founded fear of returning. You can apply for asylum, but you need to do it. In any case, you're supposed to apply for asylum within a year of being in the United States.
Correct. You're absolutely
there are exceptions, like if something new happens. Let's say you're here on a work visa. You're here legally, or you're a student. You're here legally. And then again, something happens where people like you are now being persecuted in your country. Then you could apply for asylum after being here a year, but you need to show you meet one of those definitions.
right.
And so I wanted to give that little overview, because you're right. You're not going to be able to win asylum if you're leaving or fleeing general conditions.
Well, and the other thing is, and I've been adamant about this because you and I know the law. I'm not a lawyer. That's why you're here. But, I do know the laws pretty well since I had to preach them and teach them and whatever else.
Yes.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but, asylum was created so that you would seek refuge in the country neighboring your country unless you came in by plane. But, to reside, for example, with some of the things that the cases that I've seen, when you have transited or lived in 3 or 4 other countries, you become a resident of a country, and then you're dropping your documents at the border before you enter the country illegally into the United States, that really kind of bars you from qualifying. You've been seeking refuge. You've already been accepted in a different country. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes, that's a good point, because it's very subtle. There's some things are blatant, are totally, you get permanent residency in a third country, unless you started getting persecuted there, then you are barred from asylum. It's one of those bars. There are things that bar you. One of them is what's called third country resettlement. So that would bar you. Some things are a little more subtle. Let's say you were walking Colombia like that gentleman. He did not feel comfortable the countries that he walked through. And what's interesting is he was not offered permanent residency in any of them. Where it gets a little interesting, and when I ask, because that is a question, I've represented people who walked here, let's say from El Salvador. And, one of the questions then is, did you have lawful status in the countries you walked through? The answer has always been, if it's somebody that I can represent, no, then why not? Well, I was afraid there. There was nothing for me there. They wouldn't offer me. And another question is, well, did you ask for asylum there? No, it's just as dangerous there as it was in my country, for example. So the big question for many was Mexico. Did you ask for asylum in Mexico? Did you qualify for asylum in Mexico? Did Mexico offer you residency? So if they didn't, then, Luisa, it's a little bit more subtle, where that's an arguable question.
Right.
So that the person might still be able to apply. But what you said is absolutely true. If you've been able to stay in a country for a year or more, then it really also, even if you didn't get the lawful status, it still becomes a question that needs to be addressed either with the asylum office, because that's one thing I was going to say. If you're not in deportation or removal, you can apply with the asylum office. It's got to be within a year of entry or within a year of you meeting an exception, an exceptional, extraordinary circumstance that prevented you from applying, or a change in your country, changed country conditions, or something that's recognized as you being here legally, and all of a sudden you're not going to be here legally. And now it does, now you find yourself where you are going to need to apply for asylum, or you need to return if you have an asylum.
Right.
And Luisa, it's so subtle. But what you said is so true. Third country resettlement, that's it. It's called firm resettlement.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And again, there is a law from when you and I were, doing this in the 90s or early 2000s or late 90s, where you still have to show why you didn't or why you couldn't stay in one of the countries you walked through. I mean, that is, or that you traveled through or drove through. That is a question, and it is something people need to address.
Yes,
It's on the
you need to
application.
understand correctly. Listen, we're going to have to cut over to a commercial break real quick because we do have sponsors we want to highlight. Thank you for waiting.
This episode of Frontline Facts with Luisa Deason is brought to you by Trace Investigations. When the truth matters, experience matters. Trace Investigations specializes in missing persons cases, cold cases, family court matters, complex fraud investigations, and professional process serving. Whether you're navigating a sensitive custody dispute, seeking answers in a long-standing case, or uncovering financial deception, they approach every investigation with precision, discretion, and professionalism. Their team brings over 30 years of combined experience, with a keen attention to detail and integrity at every level of the investigative process. No shortcuts, no guesswork, just facts. Consultations are always free. Call them today or save their information for when you need it at 920-858-5931 or email traceinvestigationstx@gmail.com. Trace Investigations, because the truth is worth finding.
When it comes to motorcycles, there's talk, and then there's real experience. At Mad Dog Moto, it's hands-on. Street bikes, dirt bikes, high-revving machines, and hard-ridden trail beasts. From routine maintenance and diagnostics to engine builds, clutch replacements, suspension upgrades, and performance tuning. Every bolt matters. Carbureted or fuel-injected, electrical troubleshooting, precision dial-ins. No shortcuts, no guesswork. Because performance means nothing without reliability, and power means nothing without safety. This isn't just wrenching, it's craftsmanship. It's knowing how a bike should feel when it's tuned right, how it should respond when you twist the throttle, and how it should hold up when you push it hard. At Mad Dog Moto, every machine gets treated like it's our own. Ready to ride stronger? Call us today at 346-404-3901. I repeat, 346-404-3901. Or email us at maddogmotoservice@gmail.com. Mad Dog Moto, dependable, powerful, ready to up your ride.
Well, we are back. I am Luisa Deason. I am your host for Frontline Facts. We are correcting the rhetoric, and we're coming back to our guest today. Back to my guest, Magali Candler. She is a certified immigration attorney and an expert in her field with asylum cases and all kinds of other issues. But Magali, before we left on our break, we were talking a little bit about what really needs to happen. Let's talk about those that have been here for 20 years that have been out of status and what kind of recourse they may have. You know, the rhetoric is also telling people to go back. I know that the service, for example, is offering quite a bit of money for someone to self-deport. And let me get your idea and your stance on that and why you think or believe that should happen or not happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Luisa, for having me. The problem with that, because, I think people would leave if they knew that they could come back legally. Many of the people who are waiting are hoping for a change in the law or for a way that maybe they've They have started a business. They've got U.S. citizen adult children, college-age children, children who've graduated from college who are doing really well, who've got a little business or self-employed. And to leave would trigger a 10-year bar. It's a terrible law that started in September 30th of 96, was effective April 1st of 97. And you get a 3-year bar if you're here over 180 days without permission and leave, or a year and leave. So I want
You also get dinged with working illegally in excess of a certain
you
amount
can't.
of time.
Yes, if you're becoming a resident through a U.S. citizen spouse or a U.S. citizen 21-year-old or older son or daughter, immediate relatives, those are considered immediate relatives. The illegal work is forgiven. I think that under employment-based or preference categories, working without permission could ding you for the individual. I feel like there might be a little bit of some wiggle room with people who start their own businesses. But again, most of the cases I see of people who can later get their residency are ultimately through a U.S. citizen spouse or a U.S. citizen 21 or older son or daughter. So any illegal work would be forgiven for them. But that's a very good point. The issue I see, the greatest issue I see, is that 10-year bar law changed everything. It made people feel like they can't leave. You tell somebody, yes, leave. Here's $1,000. Here's $3,000 or $3,500, whatever they're offering. But to leave means triggering a 10-year bar and being separated from your family. I think people would very happily leave if they knew that they have a legal way of returning. People have been here over 10 years, as an overstay from a visitor visa or a work visa. They could apply in removal proceedings for something called cancellation of removal. But again, that is kind of like a unicorn. It's very difficult to win. Why? You've got to prove 10 years of being here. Not hard to prove. 10 years of good moral character. Not hard to prove for someone who's been doing only good, that maybe the only bad thing they ever did was overstay or enter illegally, which is, as you mentioned, a federal misdemeanor. But they've got no crimes. They're good people going to church or, helping their son's little league or soccer or daughters, whatever. Good people. The problem is the law also changed in 96, September 96.
I remember that change.
Yes, it was a terrible change. Here's a change. The third thing you have to prove, first of all, you cannot show hardship to yourself. So that it used to be you had only 7 years. It was called suspension of deportation. Not easy to win, but it was winnable. 7 years back then, 7 years, and you could show extreme hardship to either yourself or a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, spouse, parent, or child under 21. Well, what changed in that law, it's called the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, signed on September 30th, 96. We call it IRA for short.
I do know that legislation well.
Terrible. It created the 10-year bar, like it backfired. It created these bad things. The 10-year bar made people feel trapped here because then they know that by leaving, they've got a 10-year bar and be separated from family. And if they try to enter illegally after that, they get a permanent 10-year bar so that even if they later were to marry a U.S. citizen and qualify for the waiver, they don't. You've got a permanent.
Right. What the system has done, Magali, is they want to make sure that they know exactly who's here. You have to know who's here. And there isn't a country on this planet that doesn't have borders and immigration laws.
Exactly. And
we don't want the worst of the worst here. We understand just people that come in here for a better life. But let's talk about some of the terrorism going on. And then, the law that protect U.S. citizens from funding the illegal immigration. Texas was slammed with putting a bill because Biden lifted the public charge aspect of all the people that were brought in. And that made it a taxpayer responsibility to foot the bill and not.
But public charge is still a section of inadmissibility. That wasn't changed. maybe some of the policies, but the law is still there. You can't immigrate without proving you won't be a public charge. So that never changed, just so you know, because I think there was some misunderstanding about that in general. I want to make sure people know that. But about really quickly about people over 10 years, what changed was they had to prove exceptional and extremely unusual hardship to a spouse, parent, or child who is a citizen or LPR, lawful permanent resident. It became so that those people really didn't have a chance of getting their residency. Most of those cases are denied, whereas before the suspension was winnable when you had only extreme hardship. So I just want to make sure and let you know that, because that change was bad and the 10-year bar change was bad. Now, why not do something, pass a law where people want to work, they all come forward, we give them a work permit, we know who they are, they're vetted, they're fingerprinted, we know every single person that's here. Then it's not as difficult to find those bad people, because you're right, there are bad people coming in. But I want you to know, I've done this for 37 years, and you too, you've done those community outreaches.
I've done town hall meetings, outreach
Exactly.
efforts, all
You
kinds
know,
of things.
we both know, and I know you won't disagree with me, that the majority of people here are coming for a better life, and they all want to work. I've never had anyone say to me, how do I get benefits? Or how do I, even not how do I get a green card? The question is always, how do I get a work permit? So I have to say, when I speak to congressmen, I say, please, this would be such an easy fix. Take away the 10-year bar. People would leave. They could leave and get their green cards at the consulate in 2 or 3 years, from their U.S. citizen 21 and plus year old children, for example. They won't trigger the 10-year bar. Take that away. The other one would be, let's create a way for people to come forward and work. Luisa, they want to work. They want to pay those taxes. Think about it. It would be such a win-win. And then the third one, I think I mentioned it to you you and I were just chatting. I would love to see, and I tell congressmen this, 245I come back. It's a section of law that says it is not an amnesty. No. I've heard people try to characterize it as such. Oh, no. That is only for people who otherwise qualify for either an employment-based visa or a family-based visa.
And those are really the only two ways you can adjust your status.
It basically is, exactly. And guess what? There are a lot of people that qualify. Oh, I see employers who say, I really want to sponsor this person. I'll go, I'm sorry, I really can't help you, because after we do the labor certification and your petition gets approved, they have to leave the country. They trigger a 10-year bar and they're not eligible for a waiver.
Unscrupulous companies then turn around and they hire these sub companies and they have subcontractors, and that's just
that's illegal. Right. That's horrible. Thank you. Yes, because again, there are the unscrupulous people trying to do illegal things, but here we are trying to do things legally. And yes, if they would just take away the 10-year bar, bring back 245I, let me tell you what it is real quick. So it's somebody who qualifies for a visa. There's an employer that wants to sponsor them, or they've got a U.S. citizen son or daughter over 21, or they've got a lawful permanent resident spouse or a U.S. citizen spouse, and they're afraid of going to the consulate, or what if their waiver isn't approved? Because those people could do a waiver. But if we had 245I, what does that mean? You pay a penalty. And back then it was $1,000. It sunset on April 30th of 2001. We had one in 94. And then that one sunset in 98. And then we had to come back December of 2000 under the Life Act. And that sunset.
I remember the Life Act. I worked midnight outside the office.
I know, I did too, right? I know. And that was such a great law. Think about it. If people who are eligible for visas otherwise and don't want to try to trigger that 10-year bar because it's so scary to go to the consulate, or can't, really, an employer doing it, forget it. They would have to wait outside 10 years before the employer could bring them back. That's not going to happen. But you pay the government a penalty so you can fix your papers here. Think about the bonanza, the money that Department of Homeland Security would secure. All of a sudden, people would pay not $1,000, they'd pay $2,000. They pay $2,500. The money that they could do whatever they need for security, for vetting.
Well,
for,
now goes back to you need to make sure that you're dealing with a reputable lawyer
Oh,
that's
exactly.
certified to do the.
Yeah. Absolutely. But we
I
need
can remember what time, Magali, where we eliminated the lines outside of the building, and then we had people charging $200 to make the online free appointments at the corners of the building. And I'm thinking, this is insanity.
Oh, that's insanity. I've seen, you know what I've seen, Luisa? I bet when I say it, you'll go, oh, wait, I've heard that too. Notaries' offices charging people for the forms, like for
Charging notary card, they cannot assess.
charge it right.
Yes,
Charging
it's illegal.
forms that were free, exactly, that you could download at the time. Well, back in the day, you could order them on call and order. Soon after that, you can download them online. As far as the forms, who charges for forms? My goodness. But
That's
then
ridiculous.
we get, but Luisa, the
Well,
word.
I mean, you and I have both heard it. Now let's touch a little bit upon some of the attorneys. Like I've heard horror stories of companies that are creating the type of documents that prove someone is in a certain industry, maybe a talented type
Oh,
visa category or something of the. You and I have seen a lot of fraud. Makes my blood boil when I see
Yes.
it or I'm approached with, "Can you do this for me?" And I'm thinking that's illegal. And those kinds
that's
of people
illegal.
have
Exactly.
they need to be reported to the bar association. They need to be reported to ICE for doing illegal tactics. They're taking people's money and fraudulently creating visa category documents that they've not clearly qualified for.
No. And they need to be reported also to the FBI because they're doing things interstate, you know? So I think the FBI would be their crimes and they're doing it, you know, from sending things to one office or another. I think the FBI would be interested. What we're seeing is this too. I see a lot of people, I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, who are victims of these people. Every now and then you'll find an immigrant that's in on it. But the sad news is, on top of it all, we've got these unscrupulous, some are lawyers, some may be licensed attorneys, as you said, need to be reported to their licensing agency, in their state, and they also need to be reported. It needs to be reported to the Department of Homeland Security and probably to the FBI if they're doing crimes. What you described, that's a crime. To create false documents is a crime. So an attorney to do that will lose their license, should lose their license.
Well, and the other thing, the flip side of that coin is attorneys can't pay somebody for referrals.
No.
It's illegal.
No, that's illegal. In fact, what attorneys can do, the only thing that attorneys could do is to pay an attorney to help them. Like if they refer a case, get this, at least in Texas, they can't just pay them for the referral. That attorney would have to be working a little bit on the case. So an attorney could pay an attorney for a referral, but only if they work on the case a little bit. Otherwise, or a lot. Otherwise, it's even illegal to pay the attorney referral. Yes, it's not legal to pay but it's totally illegal to pay a non-attorney for a referral. That is illegal.
Exactly. Yeah. And I tell people all the time, be aware of who you're speaking with.
But the worst now that I've been seeing lately, Luisa, I mentioned it to you earlier. If you want me to just say.
Yes, please, let's go over that because people need to be aware of what the current fraud and scams are.
Yes, this is the latest. I've been hearing it, I'd say, for a little bit over a year, and I'm seeing it more and more. When I go in the community and do outreach, Know Your Rights presentations, various churches, recently since December, I've met 3 people who were victims of this, but I've been hearing of it. Okay, these attorneys or notaries are going on TikTok or wherever saying in Spanish, fix your papers without leaving. They say arregla sin salir. They're saying that a lot. And the thing is, most of these immigrants, as I was mentioning earlier, need to go to their consulates to get their residency and trigger a 10-year bar, which is why many of them can't. They're just kind of trapped and are waiting to see if the law changes because they don't want to be separated from their families for 10 years. They want to get their visas, so these people are preying on them Some more are doing it more innocently than others as far as they're true victims. So I met a woman who thought her son was sponsoring her. He's a U.S. citizen. They got her on various levels. He's not even 21. So they created fraud even then, but they were doing it as a Violence Against Women Act case.
She did the abused victim.
Yes, it's called VAWA.
The VAWA. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
That is just criminal.
Oh, it's horrible. It's criminal. It is. This poor woman I met with was just, she lost all color. Her U.S. citizen daughter and son were there. The daughter is over 21. I even wondered, I'm still trying to get the Freedom of Information Act request to get all the supporting documents. I did help her confirm her receipt was for a VAWA case, a Violence Against Women Act. That helps people. Hey, I do real VAWA cases. I see women who are abused by their U.S. citizen or permanent resident spouses. I've even seen a man, and you don't see it as much, but I've seen men who were abused by their U.S. citizen or permanent resident spouses.
Well, and a lot of marriage fraud petitions coming through as well.
Oh, and that's awful. But the first thing you need to prove on a VAWA case with marriage is that it was a valid marriage. So they still have to prove the bona fides of the marriage. But the one thing that these fraudsters are doing, these bad actors that are taking these people's money, they're preying on the fact that they don't, or are afraid, obviously, of triggering the 10-year bar and can't leave the country. They're saying, no, you can fix your papers here. Why? Because VAWA also works for abusive adult sons and daughters. Well, we're talking real abuse. Sadly, this is going to hurt the real cases. I have a colleague whose client, the son has what do you call it? He's schizophrenic. He's been in the hospital. They've had to call the police on him. He's threatened them with death. He is dangerous. And that's an excellent VAWA case.
Yeah.
My colleague has a real VAWA case from a U.S. citizen son over 21 with schizophrenia, with the police reports, with sadly having to be institutionalized. She's got excellent evidence. That is a real case. Yeah. These people are saying to these poor victims of their bad acting, saying, oh, your son yelled at you. Oh, your daughter was rebellious. Oh, yeah, you qualify. And God knows what they submit. It is crazy. The lady I met with in December, she hired me to do a Freedom of Information Act request. We got confirmation that that's what they had submitted, but I'm going to have to either appeal or try again. They did not give us the evidence. We want to see what fraudulent evidence was submitted.
Right.
She never gave a sworn statement. They never interviewed her. I'm suspecting the case is being examined for fraud. And this poor woman is just beside herself. She's
Absolutely.
like, I need to withdraw it. Do I just self-deport now? Are they going to put me in removal? And basically I told her it's hard to know what to do, but I said probably the first thing to do now that we know is to withdraw it. And yes, you probably will or may be placed in removal now. What can we do?
Yeah.
The government wants her, she's here. She has no papers and she was a victim of these people and withdrew it. But now we know she's here. So sadly, again, even though, technically she is subject to being put in removal, they did, they've turned her in anyway too. All these people, I met a couple, they paid an attorney who is being investigated, Luisa. Won't say her name to be careful, but
you and I both know who it is.
Yeah, exactly. And they are being investigated. But they told me at one of the last Know Your Rights I did, that they had each paid her $16,000. And, here I am, a private attorney in private practice. I do some VAWAs. I see some good VAWA cases, primarily with spousal cases. And I don't charge that. I said kind of kiddingly, I said, wow, I don't even charge that.
Yeah.
A real case.
Well, Magali, let me ask you a question. So we're coming down to the end of the show, but I want people to understand, how can they get a hold of you? Is there an email? Is there a phone number to your office? Because I know that this is going to open up Pandora's box and people are going to want to know what the truth is. And of course,
Of course.
You've been helping people for over 30 years. So,
Yes.
how can people get a hold of you or find you online or send you stuff?
Thank you. I should have a bigger presence online. I do have a placeholder. I keep saying I'm so busy just from word of mouth that I've never done the big, having the website, but I keep planning to, so I will. But they can call my office 713-672-2635, and my email address is mcandler@suarezcandlerlaw.com. Suarez is my maiden name, and I use it as my middle name, SuarezCandlerLaw.com. And again, I do have a SuarezCandlerLaw.com placeholder website where you do see my name and my number and my photo. But, maybe this is the year that I do the big website. But again, I am very busy. I am. But as a solo, of course, I get busy pretty easily. Maybe, and I didn't want to grow so much. I've been in a big firm and I've stayed small. But yes, I'm very busy. I've stayed small, but very busy since I opened my firm in 2014.
That's amazing.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Well, listen, we've come to the conclusion at the end of our show. I want to thank you again for being on. I want to thank all of our listeners and, of course, all of our sponsors who are bringing us this, the ability to be on this platform. Magali, thank you again. And I will probably be calling you back on the show at some point in time to kind of continue to help us correct the rhetoric. And make sure that people are not being taken advantage of.
I'd love it, Luisa. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
You're welcome.
See you soon.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap. And this episode is concluded. We want to thank our sponsors. And remember, I am Luisa Deason, your host for Frontline Facts, where we correct the rhetoric on immigration issues and public policy.